So Politico is the paper that everybody in Washington reads because it's got all the inside stuff on Democrats versus Republicans. They treat it like it's a game, and by that I mean a sport, right? And
it's a sports page of politics.
Exactly. That's exactly what it is. And you get the little scoop, and the congressman thinks this, and the senator thinks that. The Democratic Party says this, the Republican Party says that. Their job is not to challenge government. They almost never do. Their job is to report the chit-chat and their gossip. And in that, to be fair, they're fairly helpful. Like, they get the good scoop, and then you get a sense, okay, look, so looks like this is the direction that they're going based on the reporting. So there's a value in it, don't get me wrong. So now what drives me crazy is articles like this in Politico, though. President Obama, likable enough? Okay, so this is apparently an issue. Now, to be fair to Politico, it was a New York Times reporter, Jackie Combs, who asked a question in the recent press conference to President Obama about, hey, is the issue that the Republicans don't like you enough, and that since you're not friendly enough to them, you can't get a deal. Okay, so President Obama first says, with respect to this truism about me not socializing enough, patting folks on the back and all that stuff, most people who know me know I'm a pretty friendly guy, and I like a good party. Now, let's just start there, David. How goofy is this conversation when we're talking about, like, if you were just friendlier to Mitch McConnell, then he would give you the deal you want?
I've written a piece a couple of months ago called the no money rule. It's about the no money rule. And what the no money rule I hypothesize is, it's an unspoken rule in Washington politics, and particularly in Washington media, where money, which is the most powerful force in politics, money is rarely ever mentioned because it's seen as uncouth to admit that for all the rhetoric and this statesman and this politician and all of the stature that our political system is supposed to have, the TV show of our political system, what's actually happening underneath is dictated by essentially legalized corruption. And so a story like this, where the underlying assumption is that President Obama could get more things done or could do X or Y if he was simply nicer, a better statesman, a better backslapper. I would argue it's part of what I said is the no money rule, that it assumes that politics is about, and it's not to say that there's none of this, but that politics is mostly about, let's say, something like interpersonal relationships, rather than President Obama represents a certain number, a certain kind of interests. The Republicans represent other kinds of interests. Both sides have money, both sides have various power centers on their side, and that's essentially what decides whether something gets through Congress or not.
So but that gets to the heart of the problem with Politico type of reporting, which is that they're not remotely telling you the reality of how things get decided. And in fact, they're almost helping to deceive you.
Absolutely.
Because they make it seem like, well, like for example, later in the article, they talk about, well, when you want to get a deal done, they send in Vice President Biden because he's quote unquote the friendly guy.
Right.
But look at the fiscal cliff deal. Biden got the deal done. Why? Because he was friendlier? No. Because he undercut Harry Reid and gave the Republicans more than they expected. Well, I could get a deal too. If you say, hey, look, let's haggle over a car, and you say I want it for $10,000, I say I'm only going to give you $5,000, and I send the friendly guy to give you $15,000, you take the deal.
I mean, put it into issue terms, right? If President Obama goes to a senator in the Republican Party, even a Democratic senator, and says, I want to pass climate change legislation, and that senator looks at their campaign finance reports and sees that, I don't know, a third, a quarter, a third, half of their money comes from the fossil fuel industry. I don't care how nice President Obama is to that senator. That senator is almost certainly not going to support a serious piece of climate change legislation because they're thinking about getting reelected and they see who their paymaster is.
Now, think about how profoundly naive a great majority of the establishment media is. That they don't understand that dynamic. They almost never report about that dynamic. Instead, they have these goofball articles about who's friendlier and who's not friendlier.
I would say you're being too generous. It's not that they don't know. It's two things. One, I think they assume that it's not news. That they assume that everyone knows that politicians are essentially puppets of their paymasters, and so that's not newsy anymore. It's not a scoop. Oh, well, he got this money from the oil industry, he voted against climate change. Well, who cares? Everybody knows it. And I think that assumption is wrong. I think that And even if it is right, people still need to know that if you're supposedly reporting about the actual power dynamics of Washington. But the second thing I would say that deters the media in Washington from reporting on that is that I actually think that they feel like it denigrates them. That there is this idea, and having worked in Washington for a number of years, there's this idea that you want to believe that what you are involved in is a high-minded, serious, small d democratic endeavor. And that to admit it isn't while actually being in the system actually feels quite bad. It's actually bad. If you're a reporter in the Washington, you want to tell yourself this is a real, the system works, the system is operational. You don't want to admit that the system is broken because that reflects on, you're reporting then, you're acknowledging to yourself you're reporting on a farce.
And that gets to the real essence of it. The game is fixed. And if you're reporting it straight up as if it isn't fixed, even though you do know that it's fixed, well, then you're a fraud.
Absolutely.
And that's the heart of the problem. So that's why if you challenge them on them, to go back to my original point, they would pretend to be naive and say, well, no, I mean, look, yeah, sure, money could have an effect. Everybody knows that, to your point. Everybody knows that, right? But these are men of honor, and they care about these issues, and it is a matter of ideology. And part of the reason they report the friendly nonsense is because back 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago, that did matter a lot. If you went drinking with a senator, on the state level, it still matters, or whether you're friendly or you hate each other, etc. But on the national level, for 90% of these guys, it doesn't matter worth a lick. They're thinking, how do I get reelected? I get reelected by raising money from these donors, and that's what's going to drive at least 90% of their consideration. And basically, as David is pointing out, when all these reporters write all these articles and they don't point out that in 90% of the time, I guess they would be bored if they did, but every time they don't point it out, they're misrepresenting what's happening in politics completely.
And I think President Obama has a quote in there that...
Here, let me read that.
Yeah, it's a great quote.
So, you know, when I'm over here at the congressional picnic and folks are coming up and taking pictures with their family, I promise you, Michelle and I are very nice to them. We have a wonderful time, but it doesn't prevent them from going on the floor of the House and blasting me for being a big spending socialist.
Right, and the point there is because they can be nice to him in a essentially non-public setting. And I'm sure they are nice to him. But if they want to raise money from the Republican base, if they want to rile up their side's voters, then they'll be nice to the president, they'll go to the floor of the House, and they'll do something on C-SPAN that then gets sent out to one of their newsletters for them to raise money. And so it goes back to the point, no matter how good the relationship is between Barack Obama and any other politician on the Republican side, that is not what dictates outcomes. And when we tell ourselves that it does, we misunderstand exactly how politics works. It is not about, is this guy a nice guy, not a nice guy. And frankly, I don't think it should be for voters. And this is one of my pet peeves. I don't care if Barack Obama is a nice guy. I don't care if he's not a nice guy. I don't care I don't care if my congressman's a nice guy or not a nice guy. What I care about is, who do you represent? You can be the biggest jerk in the world. If you're standing up for the right things, then that's what representative government should be about.